Alrighty, howdy folks. Thank you for tuning in. Today we're very blessed, very lucky to be talking to Jared Blando, who the vast majority of you by now are going to be familiar with his work via the Trench Crusade Map. He has a tremendous history of illustration and fantasy cartography in wargaming and board gaming. So we'll see where we go today with the conversation. Jared, thank you so much for agreeing to chat.
No problem. My pleasure. Trench Crusade was a fun map. Mike Franchina, really cool dude. It was interesting getting the tap because a buddy of mine who's a war gamer had been talking about it like, I don't know, a couple weeks before, a week before, and I was like, I hadn't even heard of Trench Crusade. I played 40K from 3rd edition to 5th edition.
Yeah.
So I've been out of it for a while. I played a little bit of 8th. And then, so he mentioned this, and I was like, okay. I played a lot of Mordheim, and then a week later, Mike hit me up, and he was like, hey, I like your work. You wanna? I was like, I have no idea what's going on.
Nice.
So then he sent me the rules, and I was like, all right.
How did that first look at what Trench Crusade actually was? How did that land with you when you saw it can be pretty grim and exaggerated in places?
So I'm a big history buff. I love historical art. I love history, military history, etc. So I basically, once I saw, I mean, his art is amazing. Mike's art's just phenomenal and very evocative and very Spanish, very sanguinary. You know, if you've ever seen Spanish Renaissance art, you're like, oh, okay, I get it. You know, it's extremely bloody. It's very, even for the time, it was very like evocative and brutal. And he just kind of took that and just, you know, it feels like 40K in a historical setting. That's basically what it's, that's what it feels like to me. That's not an insult or anything. I think it's kind of neat because 40K has a lot of things I like about it. And so this was just kind of like an extrapolation of like, hey, religion's real, demons are real, World War I is real again, and we're just gonna have fun with it. And I was like, all right. I mean, I just thought it was cool. So I guess for inspiration, I looked at more than a few World War I maps that were put out at the time. And it's interesting seeing the crossover between like, I guess like older maps from like the 19th century into the 20th century and like that style, that illustrative style and like what they were representing. I tried to go for like a couple different things in it. So it immediately hit me. I was like, okay, I can take this somewhere and kind of take the ball and run with it. And he was more than happy to let me do that, you know?
Yeah, they seem to be eager. They don't go to people to tell people what to do. This is what I'm picking up from talking to folks attached to the project. They go to people whose talent they really like and ask them to bring their talent to the project rather than define and refine. So do you think, what was the original, if you can talk about it, what was the original brief? What did they actually say to you as the map pitch?
Well, I talked to Mike on Discord because he feels comfortable talking on that. I usually just communicate via email or like call. But so Discord, a lot of people are using Discord now. So I was like, okay, that's fine. And so he hit me up and we started talking about it. And, you know, it was first time meeting him. And I mean, I guess like I've dealt with a lot of art directors and a lot of art directors that were artists before. And usually, and he's an artist, he's a working artist. So there's a very different mentality when you're an artist and you're running a project. When you basically pick artists for a project that you're working on or that you're personally invested in, you tend to actually lighten up the grip. You know what I mean? It's less than an art director who's got a salary, who's working for the company, and da 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 da. I'm not saying that they're bad. They have a different requisite form. So he knew what I could bring to the table. When we talked about it, I mean, he basically told me that he's like, you know, it's World War I with religion. like hardcore religion. And then looking at his artwork, it's easy to see that, you know. And so I've done a number of historical maps, and I started shooting ideas at him. I was like, okay, this sounds pretty cool. Like, you know, I with maps like this, I tend to try to emulate like a cartographer working in that time, in that time and space, so that you can kind of, it's like evocative of like the world, right? So it'd be like a maybe a cartographer of like Britannia, you know, or Britain, you know, is working on a map of the current state of affairs for the common man in that time, and this is the map that he would release.
Yeah.
That's kind of my idea, where it's like it gives you enough information that a player would know what the hell's going on, because essentially the player is a fish out of water too. You know what I mean? Like he's being introduced to the setting. So you know, I just kind of took that and we just started shooting ideas back and forth. And, you know, I like a lot of like, you know, 16th century maps too, from like the Medici art room and, you know, stuff like, so it's like lots of influences. And then we just kind of mash them all together. I definitely wanted to do the heraldry. I was like I was like, no, we got to do like heraldry designs for like all the different countries and stuff. Cause I feel like it's in that time when like World War One was the time when basically most of the monarchies fell after World War One because of the such unrest. But this is not that.
Yeah.
This is pre World War One, right? You know, like essentially this is a World War One against demons. So how different is that? I think that heraldry was important because it was important to people, you know, and a country's identity and who they were. And I think it would be doubly or triply important in a setting like this, where it just seems like everything's going to hell in a handbag, like literally. And yeah, so that was kind of important to me. And we you know, I had come up with different designs for the heraldry. He revised them, which totally made sense. You know, that's a good working relationship, though. You know, artist will push, art director will fine craft and tailor and kind of mold the piece. And he was great. You know, I shot ideas, he shot ideas, we collaborated, and you know, the map came out. He didn't. I've done so many maps that I pretty much know what I'm doing, at least to an extent.
Yeah.
So I initially gave him a big sketch, a big like rough pencil sketch, and he had a good idea. And then I kind of left it for a few months because I had a bunch of other work. And then he was like, "Hey, I need this in like 3 weeks," and I was like,
Damn.
okay. I thought I had like 3 or 4 months. He was like, no, now we're moving it up. We got to do this. I was like, okay, that's fine. So I just busted my ass on it and got it done. I don't know, in like a week and a half or something like that.
Wow, nice.
And,
Yeah, I was gonna ask about that because I had to keep it under my hat, as it were. But I saw an initial rough sketch. I guess that's the one. I saw it in November. I got a little peek at the map, and I was like, "Oh shit!" You know, the map is right there. Then it comes out at AdeptCon. I was wondering what the time frame was, to kind of tie it all together. But like a week and a half to get it suddenly finished.
I mean,
sounds.
he gave
fun.
me like 3 weeks, and I pretty much like I can get cranking once I start really working on a piece and painting it. Like I can get it done pretty quick. I mean, the map's not that big. I did it at like, you know, 600 DPI or 500, so it can be blown up. And the way that I work, I tend to work pretty detailed. So I went in and I made sure, but the map physically isn't really that big. It just has a lot of like stuff.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too hard. I broke it up into elements like I usually do for my work. And I just kind of tackled an element each day, you know, and then submitted that. And then I think we had like 1 or 2 rounds of revisions. But nothing super major, you know, because the harder you work on the sketch, generally, the easier the finished piece is, because an art director knows what to expect, you know, what to get, and you have less like big structural changes, and there weren't. I don't think a few things with the iron wall I think needed to be extended, and an extra demon portal up north had to be put in, and some other stuff. Like I said, the heraldry had to be redone. We're careful with the heraldry because we wanted to represent like Wales and a couple of the other places. I put in more like Russian kind of um, principalities, like little heraldry, just to
Yeah.
represent like the houses that would be in Novgorod and all that stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, it was it was it was pretty good. It's pretty straightforward. There's just a lot of work. It just did it relatively quickly.
Yeah. The impact in the community was pretty much instant. Like it I guess got unveiled at Adepticon and then hit the internet and just boom. It was one of those moments where Trench Crusade, I always call it like broke containment, when something goes outside of its established community, and just people all over social media, all over Twitter and Reddit and everybody talking about it. I did a video showing the map as I tend to do, and it just blew up instantaneously. It must feel wonderful to produce something that has such impact, and interesting to be able to see it happen in real time.
Um, yeah, I guess like I I've been illustrating for a long time. I think it's like 16, 17 years. I've done a lot of work. Um, so I guess it's funny, like a lot of people, like if I go to conventions and stuff, they say something very similar, and it's true. Like it does make you feel good. It makes you feel good meeting fans who are just like, we really like the work that you do, the work that I do sometimes affects people in ways that I just never thought of, or just never realized, you know what I mean? To me, I was just like, I mean, this is a decent paycheck, and and it's interesting work. It's different work for me, and that's really important for me because I do a lot of work for WotC and like Dungeon Dragons and that kind of stuff, and that's cool. It pays well. This was like, it started to become a passion project. It wasn't at first. At first, like I said, I didn't know what the hell Trench Crusade was. I
Yeah.
I am not. I play BattleTech. I play bolt action a little bit, and yep, I don't play much else other than that. I play some historical stuff, so I'm not like super plugged into the community. Warcry, I play Warcry, and so when this got mentioned, I was like, okay, like I don't know much about it, So then I did some research, and then talking to him and him expressing, like seeing his artwork. I mean, you can't help but get inspired when you see his artwork. And he showed me the rules. I played a game at my local game shop, and I was just like, okay, this is really cool. I really like the idea of him of the World War I with religion. I think the religious aspect's interesting. I mean, he definitely takes it to 11, but I
Yeah.
think it would be taken to 11 considering there's literally demons, walking around and murdering people.
Yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
So,
That's genuinely the interesting fulcrum. Is the world is a horrible place. Surviving a horrible world takes very difficult things to do. So of course the church is all blown up and powerful, incredibly rich, and sometimes making decisions that we might deem squeamish. But it just kind of has to be done in the world, which is super interesting and a big part of the appeal for me. Um, a big part of the appeal of the map is you have this wonderful border on the map that's just really nice. Is that I guess where I want to go with this question is, do you, when you're drawing a map for a world, do you like, this is, and kind of Tomas and Mike have been saying, essentially an in-world map, right? It's drawn by somebody who inhabits the world. Do you think of that cartographer as a character? Do you try and develop them in your head a little bit, or do you just blast it out one way or the other?
it'd be, I wouldn't like develop the person as a character, but I would try to, part of it is like, what would be important to be represented to the powers that be? Because remember, just like me, I'm just a working schlub. I'm a freelancer. So you work for all these different people, and they have important ideas that they want to get across, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what you think most of the time. Now, you can't help but put yourself into a piece, right? Because you're an artist, you're a human being. But my idea is like the detachment is actually part of the interesting thing, which is if I was to be a cartographer in Britain in this world, what do the powers that be want to show? What is important to them that they're trying to convey to the people that this is supposed to be, whether it's rich, poor, whoever this map is going to be distributed to, and whatever. If you look at cartography through history, that's exactly what cartographers have to do. It doesn't matter what they think. Now, they can slip themselves into the piece, and they often do, and it's hilarious when they do. But it's mostly about what do they want. So what would the government of Britain, what would they want, the king want portrayed if this map was being distributed on the streets of London at that time? What does it show? It has to be heroic. It has to have an emphasis on Britain. It has to have an emphasis on the defense of the people. It has to have an emphasis on the church. What is the church doing? They're sacrificing, right? You're sacrificing for them. They're like in the piece on the left-hand side, I have like, it's like a skeleton, a sacrificial person with a I think it's a bishop's cowl or bishop's hat, who's like laying down and he's bleeding into a cup. The cup is basically like representative of like Arthurian, there's Arthurian legend tones, which I'm sure is being shoved onto the people constantly. The blood is holy, blah, 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 blah. It's, what is it built on? It's built, he's kneeling on, a pillar of stone. What's the stone? Stone is strong, right? Like there's all these layers that I try to, sometimes it's subconscious that, other times I'm just trying to draw something that looks cool. But other times it's like, when you read about this stuff, and I read a lot of dry history books because I'm boring and I like that kind of shit. But basically, it's subconsciously like slips into your work, and like so that's kind of what's going through my head, where it has to portray what people want to see, and also what the powers that be want to show them to keep them strong. To basically tell them that it's going to be okay, because our fighting men and women are on the front lines, and we will overcome the darkness. We will fucking defeat them. We will stop them with bullets and bayonets, basically, and just grim determination. It's pretty British, and I think the map is. I have friends in the UK. I love going to the UK, so I guess for me, like that kind of took precedence, and it also made sense. Like they seem to be like farthest from the epicenter of the madness, so they would probably have the most of their shit together, as opposed to like France or even like Eastern Europe or like the toll booth kingdoms of Germany, and like obviously the Holy Land is like on fire. Like, so it made sense that they would be able to commission a map to show people. It's like all these ideas that I'm just like, okay, like this is what I'm gonna go for. You know what I mean? So
they might even want to play diplomatic games with the map that you're showing. Maybe the borders of certain places are slightly different. Maybe the heretics, they're looking a little less powerful on the map than they might be in real life, because of course God and Britain is winning.
Right.
That's really interesting, and I think that's one of the things that was maybe a little missed in the community reaction, and a part of that is down to how Trench Crusade is working and developing as a game, where the confusion is almost the point in some of the lore, and some of the way that Tuomas and Mike like to develop stuff is very like it is or it isn't, and some stuff isn't always clearly defined. And this was one of those moments where some people were looking at the map as being, this is how the Trench Crusade universe is on X day in 1914. It is exactly this way. But it seems like that's not actually how the map was developed at all. The map was developed as a storytelling element in and of itself.
Yeah. I'd say that. I mean, no map is things change. I mean, people, it's amazing to me and to myself, where it's like when you're young, you're like, oh, well, things have to be this way. Things are always this way. It's like, that's not true. It's never true. It's never been true. Things change constantly, and it's frustrating for a lot of people, and it's scary. A map, you look at any map, I mean, yeah, the borders of the United States haven't changed in what, 50 years or something, which is great, but some of some of the European countries, they haven't changed. But I mean, that's a relatively new thing. Okay, that's pretty new. It's like even 100 years ago, things are changing constantly. They still change. Who the hell knows what's going on now? It could change more. Who the hell, I don't know. But like with the map, it serves as a representation. Any map really serves as a representation of uh an idea, as well as this is how it should be, or how it is according to the powers that be, right? So this is, you could look at it, I agree, like you could look at it as like, oh, we're losing or we're winning. I mean, I find settings where the good guys are resurgent as better than it's 11th hour, we're all gonna die, we're just grim to, it's like stupid. It's like why do what 40K has been doing for 40 years? Why do that? And all these settings try to do it. It's lame. Do have it that the bad guys are scared of the good guys.
Yeah.
Have it that the demons, like that's my, I guess that's subconsciously went into the map too. Is they basically, the demons have surged out of these portals, and they're all over the place. And we have the different we kind of threw ideas around where the different symbols are the different demon princes. If you look on the map, you could see different, and they're basically, I was like, well, they could be like division symbols, right? Marked by military commanders on, okay, well, this Prince of Hell is, his troops are operating here, and then they can exploit that, right? Because the demons of hell hate each other. They all have their own things, politics. But I guess my idea was like that the forces of the good guys have finally gotten their shit together, and we've stopped them, and now we're counterattacking, right? Is basically, we will win. Okay? It doesn't make the setting any less awesome, because you know that it's like Germany in 1944. Yeah, we won D-Day, and the Russians did Operation Bagration, but you know what? The Nazis are still fighting, and we still fought for another year, and it was brutal. So to me, this is like a rendition of that, and that could be interpreted by many different people in different ways. I just like the idea that it's like, no, the demons are, they're yeah, they had their heyday, and they're fighting hard, and they want to conquer this, but they have their natural limitations as well.
Yeah.
They have these portals of hell that they have to be connected to, that they have to come through, that they didn't, and there's politics. It's always politics, my favorite thing, because
Yeah.
the demons of hell, their politics, it's like that's almost, it's basically human. Like they have their own problems with each other. And, oh, I don't want to work with this guy, and I'm not going to support him, and I'm not going to do that. It's like those are all things that we don't understand, the mortals don't understand, but they do. And they have the same problems that we have. And if we get our shit together before them, they are vulnerable to bullets. You throw enough artillery and bullets and technology at them, and they will lose. So,
Yeah.
but that's just, again, that's my personal view on stuff like this. I don't like the 11th hour stuff generally. I think 40K has been doing it. I mean, Jesus
long.
Christ, forever. Yeah, too long. I'm like, I like the idea that the Primarchs are coming back. That's cool. But again, I don't know. Don't do that. I don't like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I shouldn't say I don't like it, but it's like, I don't find it that interesting anymore. It was cool 20 years ago, 25 years ago when I was into it. Now, I mean, how many times are you gonna do the same thing over and over again?
Yeah, I personally find myself in a place where I like stories where the heroes win. They win hard battles, oftentimes by being hard people. And
Yeah.
that's what appeals to me in a great way about Trench Crusade. It's like you were saying, And simply mathematically, one could argue, yes, hell should potentially be winning this, but math is one thing and human nature is another thing. The best and brightest are not the ones going to hell. Almost by definition, they've proven themselves to be incapable of overcoming their worst natures. So they're not going to go to hell and suddenly be like, you know what, this has been a real learning experience for me, and I'm going to really learn how to work with the next guy.
Yeah. Well, evil begets evil.
Yeah.
I mean I'm not even super religious or anything, but like that has proven that yeah, evil never dies, but evil begets evil. Like it will. That's why I think the politics of hell are actually really fun and interesting, because you're just like, yeah, they really are backstabbing the hell out of each other. They don't trust each other. They have their own goals and agendas, and they hate each other. And because I mean, that's if you look at if they wanted to do a thing on like the princes of hell and like all and the different demon princes and stuff, that'd be really interesting, because they don't like each other. Even in if you read the Bible and stuff, they don't like each other. Nobody likes each other. You know, they're all there because they're all selfish and jealous, and yeah, they're powerful. It makes them very powerful. They're you know, I mean, they're almost unstoppable in some regards. But weak people that bind together are often stronger than a single strong person, right?
Mm.
And that's basically how I looked at the map. Whereas like, yeah, we have all these problems, humanity has all these problems, but when faced with a world-ending threat that is tangible, you know, people tend to, you know, they tend to work together. You know, they'll put aside their differences to try to end the threat,
Yeah.
generally.
What happens after can always be very interesting, but until that last demon is down, and Trench Crusade is such an interesting world because you've got so much occurring in so many small ways, because right now it's skirmish level, the game. So you can have little bits of conflict popping up in so many different areas, because you don't need to explain million strong armies marching across the globe right now.
Mm-hmm.
So that's another element that can make it so interesting. Like on the map, obviously, and within the lore, there's Avignon has been taken over by Beelzebub, so he's got his little kind of center of power there in Europe. But where it's really interesting is down in the Levant. You've got like Ekron, Beelzebub, and Mammon so close together, and they really don't vibe. Like they really dislike each other very strongly in the Trench Crusade universe. So that area is more narratively interesting than Avignon is on its own.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's fun because it's all there on the map.
And I think it's interesting, like the setting. I don't know. I'm a big Trekkie. I love Star Trek, so I think I brought some of that into this, and I love the idea of like people working together, you know, and like an interesting part of the setting is that the church kind of knows what's going on more than the standard person, right? Like they have their beliefs, and a lot of their beliefs are real, right? They become true. They are true. And it's almost like the church is both a positive and negative factor, right? They do rally people together and they call them to arms to fight this tangible threat. But I don't know, it's such a weird setting. And when it comes to like our real world, like so many people have interpreted the map in so many different ways. Sometimes like super left or super right, and I'm just like,
yeah,
y'all know it's a game setting, right? Like it is a story by, you know, a couple people that thought it was cool. It's not like supposed to be representative of like modern real world politics, even if I injected some of that into the map because it makes it more believable. Like any map that has anything that has connections to real world stuff, cultural identity, this kind of stuff is interesting. You just find it just makes it more realistic, and people want realism, or at least a touch of it, even in their fantasy stuff.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big proponent of like realistic fantasy, like low fantasy settings with like or like archmages, um and that stuff's interesting to me. I'm not a big high magic guy, right? High magic is just kind of like I'm like, okay, so you wouldn't have like a working economy. Like like on the way that like why would there be farms?
Yeah, you'd be post
If you have
need,
high
right?
magic, yeah, I could produce food and water at will. There would be no farms. There would be no fortifications. There would be nothing. You don't need any of that because you have these. In low magic settings, it's like, no, there's a few people that wield an insane amount of power, but they're limited. Power's dangerous to wield, and most issues are decided with like steel, and like normal stuff. So this is kind of that setting too, even though it has the high magic element of like the demons and like this kind of stuff, but it's still grounded in, you know, I would say like Western and I guess Western and Middle Eastern religion, right? I mean, there's facets of all that stuff in this setting. And if you read the Bible, the Quran, or the Torah, you're like, oh yeah, there's like lots of crazy shit in there. You're just like, okay, there's giants now. Where do these come from? You know what I mean? So you can you can incorporate a lot of that stuff into this and those ideas. But I think Mike also had to kind of thread the needle, and we had to thread the needle too, of like making the map representative of everybody. I mean, my favorite faction on the map is the Sultanate,
Yeah.
because I was like, they're the most interesting to me. They're the most interesting. Not only is their armor design and idea and like their version of events, like through the Quran, through what we know of like Islamic culture and religion, is just as valid as the Christian version. Like it's true. We know it's true because the Great Iron Wall came up. You know what I mean? And like there's a great storm. So it's like I that was my personal thing, was I was like, oh no, like the Sultanate is like really, really rad. But a lot of people they just read into this stuff like so hard. And I'm like somebody told me that it's like racist. The map is racist. I'm like, I mean, okay, I don't think it is. I didn't have that intention, but you're gonna get those people, and you just gotta, especially with religious stuff. With religious stuff, you really gotta kind of thread the needle, because a lot of people get very
And some people will have a very strong negative reaction, no matter what it is that the work is showing, because of 1,000 other factors that have nothing got to do with the work, right? Maybe they're just in a place where they're having strong negative reactions to most things. And social media now will amplify, and more interestingly, not only will it amplify that feeling, but it will also find you almost picture perfect the person to argue with. Now that's really what social media has been kind of angling towards for the last number of years, right? Is to find you someone to argue with for a day, and then be about your business. I'm a little too long in the tooth. I'm a little too old to be getting worked about this kind of stuff, and I just love. And this is going to sound probably very strange, but I've been thinking about it for a while, that Trench Crusade for me is very reminiscent of, in the 90s when I was a teenager, there was a big splatterpunk literature movement of like Clive Barker and people like that. It was like blood for blood's sake in literature, and it was really interesting and fun because everything was being really pushed so very hard. How gory can I make this singular paragraph be? And when you're young, you're a teenager, and it's like, oh, this is so cool. Yeah, let's go. And this might sound strange, but that's what I see in Trench Crusade a lot, is that vibe of let's push it out. I feel like kind of something that you said is interesting to me. I feel like Mike is really interested in making the most horrible world that he can think of. That's what interests him. right? In his brain, he wants it to be the most god awful thing you can imagine. But when somebody comes to him and goes, I've created a story of genuine hope in Trench Crusade, he's like, that's fucking awesome. Like he loves that response
Yeah.
that people bring, where they're like, look, I know that you want horror and that you see horror and you found horror, but this is what I found. And strangely enough, that's what the map is representative of, is a lot of people were like, oh, you know, hell should have taken like so much more territory by now. But why? Like why can't people win? It can be horrible and hard, and the price that they pay can be tremendous, but they can win.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like if you take a snapshot of like the world in like early 1943, maybe late 42, and you're like, man, how are the bad guys not going to win? You know, how are they not going to win? And in reality, it's all they are powerful, but they have vulnerabilities. And the people got together and we exploit, especially the Russians, exploited those vulnerabilities. It's like, I think part of the demons, part of their, I guess this is from the religious angle, or the idea is like part of the demons' idea, or one of their weapons is fear, is to tell you and to show you that you are already lost and you should give up.
Yeah.
And all you have to say is no. And that's the thing. That's to me, that's Trench Crusade. That's the people are saying, no, you're not as powerful as you say you are. You know why? Because because you bleed. We bleed too. We all bleed. And if you bleed, that means that you can die. And we're going to kill you. We're going to drive you back step by step, inch by inch, until you destroy the gates of hell. We're going to win. That's what Trench Crusade is to me. And that's, you know, again, the map is a snapshot of like, they're not as powerful as they make themselves out to be. Yeah, we've lost territory and a lot of people died and it's horrible and they're doing horrible shit. But you know what? But if we, you know, if all these kingdoms, if all these countries basically get their shit together and they form their alliances and they stop fighting each other and they can hammer this out, which the demons are trying to exploit. It's the whole thing. They exploit the worst parts of mankind to do the worst things. But unfortunately, violence can be a tool for good. Okay, that is a rough quote from somebody. But in some instances, this is like, yeah, we have to use violence to drive them back, and yeah, we're gonna sacrifice a lot, but we're gonna win. That's just how I look at it, and I think it's good to make a setting where you're like, you know, the stakes are really high. That's basically the setting that he made. The stakes are incredibly high, and not everything the good guys do is great. The church is doing questionable stuff. You know, people are doing questionable stuff. Lots of people did questionable stuff in times that we're people. That's what people do. You drive it, you put us in a corner, and then we go freaking berserk, you know, and you do crazy shit and say crazy shit. That's basically what's happening in Trench Crusade. But the storm will pass eventually. And I guess I just look at it as a more hopeful setting. But again, I think that's because I'm a Trekkie. So I'm just kind of like, there's nothing we can't do if we don't work together, you know? And the countries of Europe and the Middle East is that we've done it before. I mean, I think there's a reason, not just because World War I equipment is interesting and cool, and it looks weird and totally brutal and gigantic. You know, you look at World War I stuff and you're just like, this is just insane. Like the crazy shit that they came up with to murder each other.
Yeah.
But I do think that I think somewhere in Mike's mind, I think there was a part of that idea that it's like the alliances that were formed got us into it and they also got us out of it eventually. You know, so, and the same with World War II. Like, I think that was part of it. I could be completely wrong. I'm not going to speak for Mike, but that's kind of what I got out of it, where I was just like, no, this is like a really interesting time. It could be mankind's worst time, or worst moment, or it could be mankind's best moment.
Yeah. It's
right?
like the joke is, as a European, we've been the cause of and solution to all of our problems. And it's pretty on the nose. It's kind of a Simpsons paraphrase, but like it's definitely true, I think. And it's sitting there in the game. Tomas has also said they're not too into the idea of this frozen world thing. Like they want it to shift and change and develop over time, which is kind of fantastic and exciting. One of the things I guess I wanted to cover, and if I don't ask you, people will more than likely kill me, is the sea serpent and the Baba Yaga and stuff like that. It kind of, are they representative of actual things, or is that the whole kind of here be monsters vibe of classic map drawing?
I would say they're probably representative of real things.
Ooh, spooky.
So, you're talking about a world that has demons walking around. So I'm assuming that I don't know the whole everything about, I don't think anybody knows everything about Trench Crusade and what's going on and the lore that Mike intends and Tomas, everything that's going on. In my opinion, when I put it in there, or put it in the sketch, she was like, "That's cool." The typical Mike, like, "Oh yeah, that'd be cool." Like I can imagine, giant, World War I, cruisers and battleships steaming around, and there being giant monsters that they're fighting. I can imagine that in a world where demons are walking around. Why not? The world is 76% water. You think demons can't swim?
Yeah. I saw somebody
You know what I mean?
have I saw somebody have a wonderful little headcanon when they saw the creature. They were like, imagine if that thing is like a mobile portal and it just like rolls up somewhere and vomits out a load of hell demons and then rolls off again. It's like, yeah. There we go.
Well, how about like a battleship, like a Queen Elizabeth or something, with but the guys with like cutlasses and pistols, and they're like blasting the demon as it's like attacking like, a squadron, and demons are swarming onto the ship. So you have literally Marines on the ship fighting hand to hand with demons while machine guns and 20 millimeter cannon are chattering, it's just like, just again, limiting the setting to, well, it's just demons are on land. I'm like, why? You think demons aren't smart enough to swim, or that they can't develop creatures? Like, they're intelligent.
Yeah.
The demons they're basically they're angels. They're their first race, right? Basically, supposedly God's chosen. They're a race of people. They're not humans, but they are people, and they're obviously intelligent. So why wouldn't they? And they develop technology either as a weird like parody of ours, or it could be the other way around. They're giving us ideas. Like that's the cool interchange here. Is like I like I like villains that are intelligent. I like villains that have their reasons.
Yeah.
Okay, like if you go back to like Star Trek, I love DS9. I love Gul Dukat. It's one of my favorite villains because he thinks that he's a good guy.
Yeah.
Okay, he thinks in his, he will justify his actions no matter what. And to me, if they can bring some of that to Trench Crusade, where it's like, yeah, the demons are bad, but they have their reasons for what they're doing, and that makes them even more interesting. So to me, like, yeah, they're intelligent. They would be able to develop weapons and ways to overcome our counterattack, right? Or strike us where we're weak. They can capture prisoners and read their mind, turn them, like go for scientists, find out new ideas of destruction. There's all these things that, like, all the stuff that can be written into that or in people's headcanon that you can incorporate into this world, because it's like when you just are like, demons are bad and they're just here to destroy us. It's like, yeah, but why?
Yeah,
Give me a reason why.
Yeah, it's a little tired. Hell making certified efforts to brain drain the afterlife is far more interesting. It's like, how do we get the guy who invented TNT to be like damned to hell? Let's work on that for a minute. That's fun.
Well, and the other thing is, like, if you think about it, like Lucifer, if you're going that route, like Lucifer led a third of the angels in rebellion. and they fought this war. Supposedly, if God is all powerful, he could just snap his fingers. Said, I'm going to end this. No, he couldn't. Now, he said he could, but that's if you believe him.
Yeah.
That's if you believe that God is all powerful. But no, the angels, the rebellion was defeated and he was enslaved. Instead of killing Lucifer, he banished him to the underworld. Why? Why couldn't he kill him? Oh, well, he's compassionate. Really? Like that, these are the questions that you're answering. It's like, why are they doing what they're doing? Maybe there's a reason, a good reason why they're doing it and the way they're doing it. So I like that stuff. That to me is way more interesting. And then the idea of like, again, it's the politics. It's the nuts and bolts of hell. It's like I used to play Battlefleet Gothic
Nice.
way back in the day, and I still have my Battlefleet Gothic rule book, which is one of the greatest rule books ever written. And when you read that book and you read about the Chaos Fleet, it's like the Chaos Fleet has supply ships, and you're like, really? The Chaos Fleet, who doesn't care about anything but butchering everybody, they have supply ships and supply runs. And when you read about it, you're like, yeah, they just have captains that like, I mean, they need beans, bullets, and band-aids like everybody else. And I'm like, how awesome would it be to write a story from like a Chaos Captain supply, like transport ship perspective, where you're like, look, if I don't get this load over to these people at this time, I'm going to be screwed. They're literally going to have my head on a pike. It's like the working man's version of how hell works. And you're like, that's just so interesting to me. Like, I love that idea that you're like, yeah, that, they got normal working stiffs too.
Yeah.
And I guess in Trench Crusade, that could lead to interesting stuff as well.
Imagine you're a bunch of like Chaos Space Marines on the front lines. You crack a crate that's supposed to be filled with frag grenades, and it's actually like rations or something. You're like, goddamn quartermaster, fuck this again.
Exactly.
Just, like these, I understand that, and I appreciate the fact that people look at Trench Crusade and they think, wow, that world is horrible. But it's those little moments that have to continue to exist. Like, it's still the world. People still live and have lives and all that kind of stuff. And it's the same in hell, right? There'll be a society, there'll be a cultural, social mechanism of moving up and down the ladder of that society, and people will likely laugh at you along the way.
Yeah. Well, even like the gray area of like, I'm sure there's like a black market, right? There's always like in 40K they have rogue traders, right? A lot of people don't know what rogue traders are. They know more about them now, but like for many years people had no idea who the hell rogue trader was or why it was called rogue trader. But rogue traders, they're the guys that work for the fascist imperium, and they trade and work with all the people that we supposedly hate. They trade with Eldar, they trade with the Tau, they have dealings with all these people, and so you get these flamboyant, they're like, you know what they are? They're like frigate captains from like the 17th, or I guess 19th and 18th centuries, right? Where they have a lot of leeway to conduct business the way that they need to conduct business because they're on the far side of the world, or in 40K the galaxy, and that's just how they got to do things. So they associate with all these people that the society dislikes, right?
Yeah.
And in Trench Crusade, I could imagine like a rife black market, where you have demon infiltrators and stuff, guys working for the bad guys, and they're working, and you have our guys that are supposedly good, quartermasters being corrupted and shifting them supplies and doing all these. It's like those are the stories that are like, again, it's like, well, why is he doing that? Well, he's just greedy. Well, why is he greedy? You know what I mean? Like, what is he trying to do? Oh, well, maybe he's got a sick kid. Maybe he's, he doesn't make enough money under the church because the church has mandated that, overtime pay is going to be cut. It's like, you can fit, and I'm not justifying the bad guys. It's just like, that's what I find interesting. That's what makes the world real, because that's how the world is made up. Sometimes there is good and evil. There is black and white. The amount of times that there is black and white, it's not as much as people think. Like it's scary. People will justify anything to get what they need or what they want. So if they can bring some of that into Trench Crusade, And maybe they don't want to. I don't know. Maybe it's a little too close to home for some people. Some people just want a setting where it is good versus evil. I mean, how much worse can you get than demons from hell, right?
Yeah.
They're obviously bad. Um, for me, I'm just like there's a lot of settings like that, and I think if demons they hate humans, like angels hate humans, or a lot of the guys that became demons that were
Yeah.
angels, and Lucifer really disliked humans, but they also acted the same way that we acted in almost every respect, which makes them maybe their hatred of us like a little too close to home for them as well. Like
Yeah, a bit of projection involved.
or like a sibling rivalry.
Yeah.
Like these are all things that people can connect to and make the world more real. And especially when it comes to writing fiction and stuff, like I don't know, those are some of the most fun moments is like just finding like I guess the humanity even in the inhuman. Like you said, opening a supply crate and it being rubbers,
Yeah.
or something. The guy's like, "Oh, great,"
God damn it. No, I mean Satan, damn it. But
Yeah,
yeah,
right.
no, because that's what I guess one of the hinges of my YouTube channel is that I write fiction within the world of Trench Crusade. I tell these little stories and I come up with characters and I try to give them motivations. And I never want the bad guys to just be like boringly bad. They need to have, generally speaking, they need to have something that they like and something that they dislike, and normally a grudge that they're keeping. And oftentimes, the central tenet of the grudge will just be an element of their own kind of former life that they regret in some major way. Like if they could, they'd go back and change it because they're living with the consequences now. And it's a really good way to motivate people, because oftentimes if you look at people who are incredibly good at things, singers and actors and especially athletes, when you get them talking about their lives, I would say 90% of the time what's driving them is regret. They didn't do something at some point and decided never again will I not do that thing. So I like to attach that same motivation to my villains, where they potentially made the morally correct choice at some point and paid for it. And now they're like, no, never again. I would rather make money than be right morally.
Well, and you can apply that to like, I mean, it's a great point, and it fits perfectly into Western religion, right? Or Middle Eastern regret, guilt. These are all like tenets of shame, tenets of the major religions, right? Judeo-Christian, Islamic. That's all traffics in that idea, right? Abraham's God. I'm Jewish, by the way, so I definitely know about the collective guilt, all that stuff. And it's interesting. It makes for an interesting setting, and I would take it even farther. It might be interesting at one point in the setting to have one of the demon princes switch sides, where he literally his legion. Maybe they were one of the first legions through the Hell Gate, right? And he took a lot of prisoners, from maybe Acre or one of the battalions at Acre or something, and they wind up fighting in Avignon, whatever happens, and when the war goes against them, you have a demon prince that's like, I want to be redeemed.
Yeah.
Like and all my folks do. And then you have a traitor legion to the bad guys. And then, of course everybody's suspicious of them. The church has, they have their commissars injected into their troops to keep an eye on them. They're puritanical commissars, but this is a hard fighting crack unit of traitors to hell that want to be like, those are the ideas that I'm like, this is interesting. Now you can get interesting when you make them more human. Like why, in the Demon Prince basically submits himself to, the Inquisitors or whatever, and they basically grill him and rack him, and he survives, and he's like, no, like I want to fight. I see the light. And maybe originally he was, some kind of great bishop, in his day that we thought was a great bishop, and he wound up going to hell for some reason we don't know. And he so that those are the cool things that you can kind of traffic in, where you're like, because if again, there are historical parallels to this, right? Even today, there's Russian units in Ukraine, right? There were Polish units in Germany. There were German units in the Russian army during World War II, right? You have this idea where they're like, I want to make up for what I did or we did or what the powers that be think we did in blood. And we have to prove it. They become shock troops. They get treated like shit, but they hold firm in their beliefs. Like to me, it's a tragedy, right? In a lot of respects, these are tragic. War is a tragedy. I mean, that's the other thing is it's like it is a horrible thing. And this meat grinder war in Trench Crusade, while it's being fought for the best of intentions, it's still a tragedy because people are dying over this, what really shouldn't have happened, shouldn't be, And I don't know if the catalyst event has specifically been revealed in Trench Crusade. I know it has something to do with the Holy Land, the Crusades. Da, 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 da. I don't remember reading like the exact catalyst.
Yeah, so there was like the first heresy, basically, is what it's called, where the Templars did something. We're assuming with an artifact or found a parchment and read it. They shouldn't have read it. Whatever it was they did, they decided, you know what? Fuck God. What's he ever done for us? And mistake, basically.
Okay, so the Templars are essentially hell troops now.
Well, those ones were, but the Templars are still around. They're still they're on a kind of a somatic lockdown. Imagine they've got like spells written into their bones, and kind of they're heavily controlled by the church. So nothing good, basically.
I'm surprised they didn't make the Templars just evil and then bring forward like the Knights Hospitaller and stuff, who are traditionally at least way more good guys than the Templars.
Yeah.
The Templars are like, I mean, how many times have we, that's like in our collective historical records, like the Templars were evil, corrupt, and eventually they got destroyed, right? Because of their hubris. But all right. Yeah, I read a little bit about it, but I don't remember the specific trigger mechanism. But I guess, and apparently, I mean, we've been fighting for, if that was what, 1200s? So it's been...
Yeah, it's been about 800 years.
That's a lot of fighting.
So it's a lot of fighting. It's a lot of galvanizing of spirits and power structures and all this stuff on the side of humans. And then for hell, it's nothing, right? It's the blink of an eye. That's another part of the kind of balance of it that's so interesting, because you're a demon prince. You've been around for a while. You're going to be around for a hell of a lot longer. And you're like, I can take my time, like figuring this one out.
But maybe that's why they want to be in our world. Because time actually matters.
Yeah, because it'll pass here.
Right. I mean, or the other flip side is time is literally our time there.
Yeah.
So they have been there for a long time and they don't want to be there anymore. It's horrible. It's better to fight here than to be over there. You know what I mean? Back in the hole, back in the can, because I don't know, like there's just so much you can explore, and in a very human fashion. Again, demons are bad. Demons, they're I'm not saying they're good guys or anything, but I think there's so much that Trench Crusade could explore and do it in a really interesting fashion. And maybe people will, people seem to be inventing or creating a lot of headcanon for themselves, and that's great. I mean, that's what you want in a game. You don't want to have everything hammered down. I think any game that leaves much more gray and open-ended is better than, oh well, this is exactly how it is. Blah, blah, blah. I think it's one of the reasons why 40K has been so popular, right? I mean, it's just so big. There are a shit ton of books written and stuff, but they just, how many? There's like millions of worlds. Okay, so this means endless stories.
Yeah.
And when they do the nuts and bolts stuff of like, what's his name? Commissar Gaunt, Gaunt's Ghosts.
Oh, Gaunt's Ghosts.
Yeah, I read like that omnibus, and it was really interesting. Like the Necropolis or the City of the Dead or whatever, like that whole struggle, and like it's very like it's very nuts and bolts. It's very like, this is how wars are fought at this time, and it's ridiculous. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes it comes down to some guy making a mathematical error and it fucks over like a million people. But when you're dealing with like literally hundreds of trillions of people, you're like, okay, it's just this giant bureaucracy. I guess what I find interesting is the bureaucracy. What's the bureaucracy of hell? That's what I want to know.
Yeah.
I want to figure that out, because that is hilarious to me if they have a bureaucracy in hell.
But they almost have to, right? Because I've gotten into this a little bit with some of the community, and we're trying to come up with interesting thoughts around it, where you've got the gates of hell. Okay, that's basically a port. Who controls the port? Who says what goes through and when? Who's got that? Like, you can't just hell is not. Some of the members of the community get mad at me about all this, but like, I don't think hell is necessarily free from the laws of thermodynamics by any means. So you can't just infinitely send stuff. You need to get the power from somewhere and then spend the power to send the mass. That's the way it works. So maybe I don't want you to send your mass. Maybe you've got 10 guys you want to send. I've got 10 guys I want to send. I filled out the form. Did you fill out the form? That
Right.
kind of arguing to that base level, because surely hell would be bureaucracy.
Well, having a story from the quartermaster, or the he would be like, what would they call him? The oh my God, the most powerful man in a port city is the portmaster. And to have a story from the portmaster's perspective of the gates of hell, where it's like, oh well, what's his name sent me like 10 or 15 slaves, nubile slaves, and if you don't you don't give me this, you ain't get nothing. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, you have the, like, he, and like Memnon, or Memon, and like all the other guys are like, I mean, you just got to deal with him. He's just like this low ranking demon who's just incredibly important because he's really good at his job, and they need him. So that, to me, that's the kind of stuff where it's like, yeah, you're right. Like, there would be, I mean, even if, yes, it's a magical universe and it's heaven and hell, whatever, but like, having laws that constrict or define that world so that it's just, you can understand it better, makes it more funny and more interesting.
Yeah.
Like, again, the story from the portmaster's perspective of hell, and he's just like, yeah, I mean, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
Oh, you gonna threaten me? You gonna do all this stuff? Well, I don't give a shit. I got 2 other legions waiting. They've been waiting for 2 weeks now. You want to go? No. So what are you gonna give me? It basically be like the mafia. You have the mafia controlling the gate of hell,
Yeah.
and they have their little cabal. And what are you gonna do? They know how to. They've been running it for eons. What are you just gonna kill them and you're just gonna replace them? They wouldn't know what the hell. It's so complex. You have to leave them in place, and you just have to deal with it.
Yeah. I can just imagine a guy walking up to the gates of hell, slapping the sides of it after being threatened by like a giant demon monster, and going, "You think you know how to work these runes? I don't think you know how to work these runes."
Exactly.
It'd be perfect.
Exactly.
It's that.
Yeah.
It's the concept of the uncivil servant.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way of putting it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's very good fun. I guess we could probably theory craft within the world of Trench Crusade forever. What I'm really curious about is, you were talking about how the community's kind of, head canoning the crap out of so much stuff. So a map like the one you drew, you want that to be a catalyst to imagination, right? Not necessarily defining everything for everybody. You want them to look at it and go, oh shit, what about this?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love, as a kid and as an adult, I love maps where they give me, like, if I'm running a game, RPG, or I'm constructing a force for some war game I'm playing, sometimes I like to pick an area of the map that I'm like, how about this city state, or this city, or this area? And it's like, I'm going to create a militia or an army or a force from this specific part, which is not really defined. it's just like, no, I come up with my own canon. I do this in BattleTech all the time. BattleTech's fantastic for that because there's just so
It's
many
so
worlds in
big.
the inner sphere.
Yeah, it's huge.
It's massive. So I wind up like picking a lot of times I'll pick second line garrison clusters or second line inner sphere regiments and stuff that are not well defined. And I come up with my own characters, my own CO, my own guys that are in the unit, and this is the reason why, and these are some of the refits they have because of supply problems. And it's like you create your own story, and that to me that is far more interesting than being like, oh well, this is the second house, House Davion guards. I'm like, okay, they just have all the best equipment, the best shit. That's boring. The best is winning with crap. It's
Yeah,
like when you're fielding.
what are their limitations?
Yeah, and why?
Yeah.
You know,
You've
and
also
why do they have-
actually, just to segue, you've also got like a lot of tremendously nice BattleTech art on your website. Anybody who's watching who is into BattleTech, it'll be linked in the description below. Go and look. It's incredible stuff.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I work for Shrapnel magazine now, so I usually do about 4 pieces every 2 or 3 months whenever Shrapnel comes out, and that's kind of a dream come true. That's the stuff that I like. Like map work, I've been doing it for so long and so many different types of maps that people are like, oh, is this your stuff? I guess I kind of have a style, but I change up a lot. I do different things. I experiment with my work because I get bored. I'm just like, how many times can you do the same shit over and over again? It's just boring. So I like try different things. I emulate different things. I don't know. But the pen and ink work, I love figurative ink work, and I was never good at it when I was in school or beforehand. I was never very good. So last like maybe 5 or probably 7 years, I've been working traditionally with Japanese ink pen and stuff and sketching and going, just I want to be a good inker.
Yeah.
I just love ink work, and I was never good at it. So I've been training and training and training. So I wound up going to Gen Con a few years ago, and I wound up going to Catalyst because I was like, look, I love BattleTech. And even though I'm a pretty new convert to BattleTech, my BattleTech book collection, the old and new stuff, is embarrassing now. I literally have been collecting. It's cost me like thousands of dollars. But I love it's Game of Thrones is one of my favorites, and it has giant robots in a military industrial complex with politics.
Exactly.
And I'm like, this is amazing.
Yeah, I know.
This is amazing. All the personalities, some of the books are pretty good. Some of them are meh. But yeah, so like, yeah, I've just been, when I wound up going to the Catalyst booth and talking to Brent Evans, and I had done work for them in like 2010. And I had done sketches for Operation Klondike, and then I did finished pieces, and my inks were just shit. And he was like, your inks aren't very good. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I know. And he's like, do you mind if we ink over them? And I was like, that's fine, dude. It's your product. Like, I guess I wasn't ready at that point. So when I came back in 2002 or whatever, and I talked to him, he's like, yeah, I remember you. I was like, he's like, your pencils were amazing. I was like, well, my ink works a lot better now. So if you have any, he's like, dude, we'll put you on Shrapnel magazine. So for the last couple of years, I've just been cranking out pieces for Shrapnel, and I love learning when I illustrate.
Yeah.
Like I love every time I do a new ink piece, I learn something. Like that to me, it keeps my brain interested. I need to be learning. I need to be adjusting, and I think you could see some. I think my ink work has gotten better.
Kind of an upward
and yeah,
curve.
Yeah, I think there's been a learning curve. And I do digital inks. It just makes more sense. It's quicker, especially for the turnaround times for them. And it's so much easier to do revisions. And I don't have to deal with photographing and sending in pieces and doing all that crap like we used to have to do. So yeah, digital is the way to go. But no, it's fun. I can sit in my bed and watch a streamer and basically ink BattleTech, and I'm like the happiest person in the world.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting because I was watching another interview that you did. I was trying to do my homework basically before we talked, and I was watching another interview that you did, and you cited Victor Ambros, as a huge inspiration. So of course I get on my little internet bike and I go off and I'm looking at a lot of his stuff, and I was listening to you talk, and as I'm looking at his stuff, I see this very almost like aggressively, energetically messiness to the work that just brings it to life so much. And you were talking about how you kind of you love that, but you don't necessarily want it in your work. You find it very inspiring, but you don't want to replicate it. So like that's so interesting because this is going to sound like a really weird thing to say. I feel like overcoming your inspirations, the limits of inspiration, is the sign of real artistry. Do you think that's a fair assessment? Instead of just like you weren't just interested in replicating what the person who inspired you the most did. You wanted to feel the things you felt when you were looking at it and then strive after your own thing.
I think to be honest, I think it's a limitation of my skill as well. I think Victor is he was I think he's passed by now, but an amazing artist for a long time, very expressive, like you said. And I've just evolved as well. Like I was very expressive, like in the early days, like I did more stuff like that, and I couldn't ever really bring it to finish. Like I think that was my problem, and like now I get too detail oriented, I get too zoned in, and I think that's a limitation of just working in digital media too, is that it's easier to do that. It's just so much easier to go super detail all over, and I hate when I do it because then I pull out and I'm like, the whole piece just looks like one detailed like psycho, freaking did it. But like I don't know, like I get sucked in. It's almost like sometimes I'm creating my own world in every piece of the piece, which is good and bad. Like I just became laser focused on certain things. And it's funny because with my map work, I can have like I like happy accidents, and I have a lot like I said, I don't really have a set style. Like people know that it's my stuff, but it's not really set. Sometimes I'll ink hill, sometimes I'll paint them, sometimes I do this. I make my own brushes, I do all this stuff. And a lot of times like it's experimenter. Like the way that I paint is very experimenting. I throw lots of different color and lots of different splatters and lots of different things, and just constantly looking for like a design ethos. And so to move somebody's eye, from piece to piece, piece of the map to get this kind of movement. Whereas like my ink work, I do that structurally, where it's like, okay, so the piece goes like, so your eye kind of, but I'm very controlled when it comes to that. And I think part of it is just because BattleTech is robotic. You know what I mean? There's a lot of like robotic elements, and you have to, it's been difficult for me coming from such an organic background to do the robotic and then mixing it with the organics. Like, if a mech is, or some guy is, fighting somewhere or just sitting somewhere, and he's like in a field, but he has all of his equipment, or the mech is just all mechanized. It has to look mechanized as opposed to the organicness of what he's in. So that dichotomy has been like really interesting for me, trying to do that. And with the pen and ink, I don't use I've chosen not to use gray at all. I just do straight up black and white. And one of my favorite things when I was a kid, and I didn't know this at the time really, but I had picked up the master unit list rules of BattleTech from like 1992 or 94, and I bought it at like a flea market. And there's an illustration. It had all the classic stuff from FASA was all black and white, right? Either had Doug Chaffee as like the artist on the cover, and all the stuff inside was all black and white because it was cheap. It was cheap to produce. But it was this beautiful black and white stuff. And I remember specifically from that, where it was like I think it was like I don't remember what the hell mech it was, but the cockpit was open. The thing was coming out of a swamp, and it was firing like a Rack 5, like a rotary autocannon 5, buzz sawing, blasting fucking rounds coming out and splashing in the water. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen as a kid. I don't know. And then again, I didn't play BattleTech. I didn't know anything about BattleTech for the next 20 years, 25 years. But as a kid, that was huge, and it's just black and white. And so I get, there's a lot of people that like my work because they're like, it reminds me of opening up an old TRO, an old technical readout, or an old source book, and looking at a piece. But this is new artwork. And I'm like, that's the biggest compliment I can get, is that's what I want. Subconsciously, that's what I always wanted to be as an illustrator. So I guess working for Catalyst and for BattleTech now, it's like that's my dream come true. Is the pay great? It's all right. It doesn't pay anything like the map work. Those color pieces, big. They just it pays the bills, and I do inject myself into those pieces. But any artist just evolves, and you find what you like to do and what you want to do more of. Eventually, you'll do that. Especially when you're a freelancer. You just get tired. Anybody gets tired. You want to change. You want to do things. So to me, I'm kind of half in, half out. I'm taking big projects for maps that pay well and stepping back from. I mean, I would accept everything a couple of years ago, and it was driving me nuts.
Yeah.
Because when you're a freelancer, if you're not working, you're starving. That's kind of the mentality, and
yeah,
and it's tough. I mean, you're self-employed. You're it's a hard thing. It's a hard work-life balance thing, and I'm fortunate that Catalyst has been fantastic to me, and very, very open to artists just being like, look, I need more pay. It takes me 2 days to do a piece. You can't pay me this much money. It's just not enough money. And Phil, who's my art director, and he's been great. He's gone to bat several times for us. And it's great. They got a BattleTech Renaissance now. They got more money in their pocket, I think, than they ever have. They're doing some stuff that people don't like, the Battlefleet Gothic, or the Battlefleet Gothic. BattleTech
no, I keep
Gothic.
calling it Battlefleet Gothic too. Every time I think it was like Battlefleet Gothic. I don't know if that was purposeful or not.
I'm just like, dude, we're going to get some awesome models. The rules should be fun.
Yeah.
I don't mind the company, and I'm not just saying this because I work, I'm a freelancer for them here and there. I'm just like, look, they've done fun stuff before. Lots of April Fool's stuff, lots of fun products that people still use, sometimes in an official capacity. I think this is fine. I think it's going to be fun, and if you don't want to play it, just don't play it. It's totally up to you, man.
Yeah. It's like you were saying too, they're going to have artists there, they're going to have game designers there, they're going to have creative directors there who have been like riding a groove for a decade. And at the very least, a project like this can be seen as a salve on their ass, because they'll have just been sat there working it for so long. Being able to express themselves in a different way will be an incredible joy for them. So I always support when board game companies, war game companies, tabletop RPG companies, I don't care where their interest is, if they want to break out of the mold and do something interesting and fun and maybe even stupid, let's do that rather than just the same old shit.
Yeah. And I got to give Catalyst credit, a lot of credit. They have changed and advanced the BattleTech universe more than any other IP I know. Okay, you look at the Age of War, then you have basically the Golden Age, right? You have the Star League, then which you can play in. You can play in the Americivil War, all the Succession Wars, the Renaissance, the Clan Invasion, the FedCom Civil War, the Jihad, which is my favorite setting. The Jihad is absolutely my favorite setting, which is people in the community hate the Jihad and everything that came with it. The Republic, the Devil and Stone and the Coalition, the Republic, the the Dark Age, and then you have the Ill Clan, and it's like they have to, and they're releasing source books. I got 5-6 source books on the Ill Clan era. I'm like, they're advancing the timeline. Like, they're doing new mechs, new equipment, new stuff, new campaigns. Like, I'm like, if you're bitching about this product that you don't even have to play, called BattleTech Gothic, I don't understand what you want from this company. They've been, there are people, like, but you get these people, these grognards that are just like, well, I don't play anything after Clan Invasion. Yeah. I'm like, you don't play the FedCon Civil War? You don't do that? No, that doesn't exist to me. I'm like, oh, there's only 100 books written, 58 source books, 5,000 mechs that have been created, and I'm, it's exaggeration. But basically, there are those people that you're just never going to make happy. And then, you know what? They're never going to buy your product anyway.
Yeah. And it's
so why even give a shit?
Yeah, I guess my disconnect from a little bit of modern wargaming is I'm not immune to having a moan about something, but I like Necromunda from when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I don't like
Right.
the new Necromunda. So when I'm talking about Necromunda, I talk about the old Necromunda, and
Yeah.
I don't sit here complaining about the new Necromunda. It doesn't offer me any value to complain about something I like. It offers me tremendous value to talk about the things that I do like. And
Well, keeping positive is good, but in regards to, I played the old Necromunda and I played the new Necromunda. I have my old Necromunda books. You know, they're great. Had its problems as a game system.
yeah,
Everybody can attest to this. It was hilarious, but it was also a beer and pretzels game. It was never supposed to be competitive. The problem with I don't mind the new Necromunda lore and stuff, and I love what they've done with like the weapons and you know like the all just the different. But the problem is the organization of the books is horrible.
yeah,
The amount of books and the confusion and the terrain is horrible. There's just all these things that are just like they're like practical reasons why the game sucks. The game itself isn't bad. It's just in my opinion, I think it's overcomplicated. There's only like 3 guys probably working on it. And you know, when you need 2 or 3 books just to play a game plus the terrain that they sell, for some fucking reason they connected the rules to the specific it's like you don't need any of that. You need some soda cans, you know, some crappy terrain you've built, and a bunch of models.
yeah,
A couple models, not even a bunch of models, a couple models, and you can have a Necromunda game. And I think that's the problem and that's the problem with a lot of people at GW today, which they have gotten better about. GW is not the GW of 2008, 2010, whatever. They have gotten better, but there are legitimate concerns. I think people have legitimate concerns, and I think the new additions, constant new additions, it's like people. BattleTech has had one rule change in like fucking 40 years. That was the partial cover rule. Okay, that's it. You're done. Whatever you want to play, you know, you can peel and take out, and you know, there's all these alternate things. It's like it is the game that you can mix. It's the most modular game I've ever played, which is makes it attractive to me. It's a chess game with mechs.
yeah.
You know, and Alpha Strike's great. It's a different type of game, which is, you know, comes from Battle Force. But like, it's I don't know. There's a lot of ways to play. You could say the same thing about 40K, right? 40K has done a pretty good job of like diversifying. You got Kill Team. You got obviously 40K itself. You have these different campaign systems they've done, but it's so popular. Yeah, it's so popular that it's got to make money. You know, it's just got to make money, and it feels sometimes a lot of times it feels like, you know, GW is a publicly traded company, and
Yeah.
they need to turn a profit, and I totally get that, but it doesn't feel like when we were kids. I don't know how old you are, but I'm 40, so like, yeah, there you go. So we're in the same wheelhouse. And you know, when you opened up a White Dwarf in 1997, you were like, "This is the coolest shit I've ever seen."
Yeah.
Or 1990.
Those days, I would come home from school and it'd be that day of the month that White Dwarf had arrived, because I won a subscription to White Dwarf when I was a kid, and it was the best thing ever. I won a competition in White Dwarf. You had to they brought out new Lictor models, and they were like, if you can find the Lictor model, you'll win a subscription. And I was like, holy shit. So I'm looking all over the place for this Lictor model, and I can't see it, and I'm like, what the hell? And I just turned my page, and whatever way I did it, there was the Lictor staring at me from the other side. You had to look at it through with a light at the back, and you would see the Lictor printed on the other side of the page.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I sent in my thing, and I won. I was like, boom, a year of free White Dwarf. That's incredible. But it was life-changing. Every month you came back, you'd have incredible battle reports. Or one day I came home, there was a Necron, a metal Necron model was just in a blister pack on the front of the thing, and they were like, by the way, there's robots now. I was like, what the fuck? There's robots! It just, like, I try to... I'm not saying those days were better, necessarily. They were incredibly exciting for me, and I worry sometimes that people are not allowing themselves to feel that level of excitement for the things anymore, because they're trying to jealously guard it from people that they think don't like it. But those people only exist on the internet. If you go down your local game shop, chances are everybody's just chilling and having fun.
Well, it's the grimdark. It's like, I guess, like I have a few friends that love 40K. They don't play so much anymore because they played for a long time, but for whatever reason, but like they're just really into like the grimdark shit, and I'm like, I mean, I played Imperial Guard, I played Marines, I had two of my own chapters of Marines. I still have my Marines painted. I did all the banner. I mean, it's ridiculous, but that was cool. You could do all that stuff, But I love the grimdark stuff is cool to an extent, but I love like the levity. There's got to be levity in the world. That's why like my buddy like hates the greenskins, and I'm just like the orcs, and I'm like, yeah, but they're just yabos. Like they're literally just dickhead like soccer hooligans that have guns that work, and they're like, and I'm like, that's fucking brilliant to me. Where it's like you have like the Marines and like all these dudes, and they're just like, humanity must survive, and then the opposite's like, well, we just like to fight.
Yeah,
we just it's just fun. Like what's the problem? Like it's great. It's super fun, and I love that dichotomy in 40K, and sometimes I feel like in a lot of the new stuff it's lost, where it's like so 11th hour, just so desperate. I'm like, dude, it's been here for like 20 years. The only levity we get is the orcs. I mean, come on, like you got to give us more. So
I like the
I don't know.
I like the Black Library authors who develop that camaraderie through humor with their characters. They'll have their in-jokes and they'll make fun of each other, and like one guy will be particularly bad at some like kind of tactical game, and they'll just keep writing him about it for like 3 books until he does something spectacular. And that's the funny aspect of the storytelling. I think it adds a tremendous amount of value, right? It takes away. I've been using the word po-faced a lot lately to describe that kind of overly serious vibe in a lot of entertainment now. And I think ultimately that's one of the reasons why I like Trench Crusade, is it reminds me, as I said, it reminds me of Splatterpunk, of Hellraiser, of that kind of Hammer House horror movies, that pointless pushing of the line towards somebody saying that's not okay to it's not okay to find that fun, but it's like, I kind of think it is. Sorry.
But why?
Yeah.
No, I agree. It feels like, well, it has a creative. I guess a big thing is like 40K used to be, and I shouldn't say used to be. Now I sound like a grognard, but basically, it felt like anything went. Like the world is infinite in 40K. I mean, you're literally talking about like, the Imperium lost like 100 worlds. Who gives a shit? There's literally millions of worlds. People can't wrap their head around it, and the mindless. I think Gav Thorpe and all of them, their whole thing was like, yeah, it's the mindless bureaucracy that keeps the Imperium going. And to me, it just makes it hilarious because it's just this giant, like, mindless, fascistic bureaucracy that people just have to keep going because they just don't know it. It's been going forever. Like, why would you stop? That's just what you do, right?
Yeah.
There's nobody there that's telling you no. So you just keep doing it, and you're like, oh yeah. Like, does it really matter at the end of the time? At the end of the day, like, I think it has to do with like England in the 80s, and dealing with their financial troubles, right? And there's a lot more of these ideas baked into 40K that have now been like kind of extrapolated out in a different fashion. But the beginnings of it, I have a lot. Like, I have my original Realm of Chaos book, that came out in '87. I have this book.
Nice.
This book, when you read this is an original, right? So I bought this like 10 years ago for like $4. Okay. Like, I don't know who the hell let this go, but
yeah.
Amazing. When you read this, you're like, this is the greatest thing I've ever read. It's weird. There's lots of weird shit in it. Metaphysical stuff about demons, about people. There's beastmen fighting alongside humans and aliens, and you're just like, everything went. The world was infinite, and they were having fun trafficking in these really crazy fucking ideas. And I feel like it evolved like anything does. It evolved, and a lot of that playful spirit kind of came out of it. And
Mm.
I think they've introduced a little bit of it with, like, bringing back the stunties and like the space dwarves. But it's like, even like, that's such a fun idea, but then they just don't do anything with it. They just, oh, they're just space marines that are short. I'm like, I mean, really? Like, that's what you came up. Oh, well, space marines sell, so I
Yeah.
mean, you gotta do that. I'm like, no, no, like, take chances. These little stunties, they should have super advanced technology, nanotechnology, like weird shit. The dude just hovers around, like, in a fucking weird Mobius orb, and it's just got tentacle shit that flies out and attack. Like, that's what they should just take it to the extreme, and they are terrified of doing that. That's the problem, is that I think you and I experienced these settings, and Warhammer Fantasy was the same way in a lot of respects, where it's like they were not afraid to just expand and do weird shit and do fun things too. I remember opening up a White Dwarf, and there was a bar fight game. They literally gave you a board and little standees, and, hey, you want to have a bar fight? Here are the rules for, your friend is an asshole and basically hits some guy in the head with his mug, and now a bar fight started. Okay, play the game. And you're just like, this is amazing. Like,
Mm.
it's so fun.
They did a
And they just
jousting game, Bretonian jousting once,
fantastic.
and they had a little, you could make your little, I don't know what they're called, the little tents
The
at either
pavilion.
end,
Yeah.
and you had the railing and everything. Ah, it was amazing.
Yeah. That's the thing. I feel like I think we both feel that. And it's a product of being very successful, having very successful IP, and it doesn't feel playful anymore.
Yeah.
It just doesn't. And I don't know if that's because we're just older, and maybe for younger kids that are picking up a White Dwarf or getting into the hobby, they do feel that. But I don't know. I still feel that with BattleTech, and I'm a 40-year-old man.
Yeah.
And they play with the fucking IP. It's okay to play, like, you don't have to constantly, but they got shareholders.
Yeah. That's why most of the stuff I'm really enjoying now is in the exploring itself phase. I'm joking a lot. I'm joking a lot with my friends, where we're all getting to the age now where it's time we started to have our midlife crisis. But we're also, like, in that kind of Gen X, Xennial, Millennial end game of, we just don't have the money to have a midlife crisis. I don't have the cash to go and buy a convertible. That shit's not going to happen. But I have the cash to spend $100 getting the original Kodor gang off eBay. You bet your ass I've got that money, so I do that, and I relive my nostalgia. That's the kind of fun that I'm having, and the new things that I'm getting into are all in the developmental spot. They're the games that are creating themselves and finding themselves, and it's so interesting to me because I can, heaven help me, I can talk to the people who are making these things, which I was always really kind of driven to do. Like, when I was younger, I already confessed to being the type of person who'd enter a White Dwarf competition. I used to, like, write letters to Tuomas, and he would, like, reply when I was a kid. So now here we are like 25 years later or whatever, and we're chatting it up on Discord and shit. Life is strange. And it can be fun if you let it. So I think that's where we are right now. We're just letting these things be fun because they can be fun. It doesn't have to be so serious.
Right. Well, I mean, the world right now is going through some serious shit. And, escapism is a real thing. It's people are worried, they're scared, whatever. I think everything will eventually work out, because they usually do. So that's my positive spin on it. I'm just terrified as everybody else. But in regards to, like, I think it's interesting, like, I guess for you, like Trench Crusade, it sounds like to me that it reminds you of what like GW and Warhammer was when you were a kid, right?
Yeah.
When it was the game was formulating and finding itself, and you felt a personal connect. You won the thing, like you had this personal connection. Like the White Dwarves used to just be so amazing. Like you could write to the editors, you could fucking call them up for rules shit, and like, Alessio Cavatore or somebody would like answer the phone and be like, I don't know,
Yeah.
I never even heard
You
of this
think
shit.
about this too much.
You'd call up one time, you'd call up the guy, they give you a rules decision, and then 5 minutes later you'd call up again and another guy would give you a different rules decision on the same shit, and it would just cause no end. But it's like you look back and it's like it's the charm
Yeah.
of that. They weren't this massive megalithic company. They were still formulating, and they had these great ideas, and it felt like people mattered, and I think now it's just massive. It's just a massive. It's a titan of the industry. But we're fortunate in the fact that we are going through a gaming renaissance.
Yeah.
Kickstarter, GameFound, crowdfunding. The internet. The Discord
The
has
joy
given all
of 3D printing.
Yes, 3D printing. 3D printing is I 3D print myself. Like all these tools have given us a gaming golden age, access to funds. You do not need to be beholden to a publisher anymore. I mean, that's a massive fucking thing.
Yeah.
So we're almost spoiled. Like we have too many options now, like, and it is cool. It's nice, like you said, being able to be in contact with like the creator, to be on the ground floor of an idea that you really are passionate about or find really interesting, and even being able to influence it and being able to talk about it, write about it. It's not something you get from GW anymore, just to put it bluntly.
That's understandable, the scale and IP protection and all this kind of stuff, but it also shifts it shifts the line on the map that exists between everything you try to sell to an audience that's creative. It's part art, part product. But for the GW thing, it's just unfortunately that product side has been growing and growing and growing through necessity, right? Through sustaining itself as a business and as an enterprise and as a thing. I don't truly believe anybody wants something like Warhammer 40k to go away. Even the people who might vehemently dislike the game and its place in wargaming, I think Games Workshop and I think Warhammer 40k are still highly likely to be the first points of entry for so many people into it, and you need that. You can't, as much as I love, like, I'm going to pick a game there's a game called Drowned Earth, which I adore. It's kind of like in a weird future where the ice caps have melted and the sea has risen and there's sentient monkeys and dinosaurs are back, but they can talk and all kinds of funky shit. And I adore the game, but no one's going to walk into a hobby shop and see Drowned Earth. You're going to walk into a hobby shop, get into 40k, get a little tired of 40k, look for alternatives, and then Drowned Earth is right there waiting for you.
But I guess my thing is that, I mean, that's what you said is absolutely true, because it is the reality of the situation, right? Turns out, 13-year-olds love metal. They love crazy shit. That's basically what 40k is a 13-year-old power fantasy.
Yeah.
Because when you're 13, you're like, this is the coolest shit I have ever seen. Dude, armored dudes fighting aliens and murdering shit in the name of whatever. Like, this is great. It's so metal, And I think Mike has tapped into that idea of like, yeah, it's metal as fuck. Like, it's super metal. Like, I don't know if you listen to metal, I listen to metal, and you're just like, this is like the most metal shit I've ever seen. Like, his artwork is metal. This is what we've been screaming about for 35 years, and now I can play it on a tabletop. It's great. Yeah. 40k has been doing that forever. I think that's one of the reasons why it's popular. I guess my supposition is like, you're saying 40k, and my buddy talks about, he literally said pretty much the same thing. it is a gateway game, right? It's a gateway game. And my supposition is, why does it have to be?
Oh yeah, I wish it wasn't.
I mean, I think maybe if it wasn't successful, there would be other gateway games. I think another gateway game would be what War Machine was a gateway game that competed heavily with them for a number of years until the fiasco started with that company. That's a whole different thing. But there have been competitors. Hell, oh God, not War Machine. What was the other one from the late '90s? I have it in my closet.
Warzone Mutant Chronicles.
Yeah, I have 2 box sets, Warzone Mutant Chronicles. In fact, I made a Gene Stealer gang out of kit bashing those guys. That game is a good game. There's a huge amount of metal stuff. They released plastics in like '97, which vacuum injected plastic stuff. It was insane, and they went toe to toe. Target Games went toe to toe with GW and went down in flames. And
they had their own magazine.
And it was awesome.
Yeah, it was. I think the editor's name was Lord Purple. I think. Like, that sums it up perfectly, I think, for me. The editor of the magazine that was directly competing with White Dwarf was just called Lord Purple. I'm almost certain it was Lord Purple. But yeah, I loved, like, Mutant Chronicles sits with me to this day. It's always in my mind. There was some art released earlier, which people will have seen by the time this goes up, by... Oh, one of the, not Bonner, one of the original. Paolo Parente.
Yeah.
He did some art for Trench Crusade, and they popped it out earlier today. And it was it was Warzone Mutant Chronicles all over again. The shading and the gradienting, and I was like, oh, it's right back in my head. It was just such a beautiful game.
And that setting is basically, I mean, it's a more advanced version of Trench Crusade.
Yeah.
I mean, essentially, the setting is, we go to, what is it? We go to Venus or whatever, and this voice comes out, and it corrupts all of our computer equipment, and it winds up being like the voice of hell or whatever. And so it's like, it's World War I between mega corporations. The only difference is we have countries in Trench Crusade, and that is a more British, brutal, cynical version of the future where megacorps run every part of your fucking life.
Yeah.
And the harder you fight, the more your stock shares go up. And that is just that is the British perfection of like, art. What is it? Art. Resembles life or whatever, mimics life.
Yeah.
And it was Bosley, I think, did a bunch of work for them. It's just fucking great. So what I'm saying is, I don't think 40K had to be the intro game. It just wound up being the intro game, and they just did what when they turned. I think they really turned into a corporation. I'd say 99. Something like that, 2000, when they literally went from, oh well, I'm gonna go down to the hobby shop down, pick up a White Dwarf and talk to somebody, whatever, to like they started to feel like a company, and I don't know, like it's kind of a shame.
Yeah.
But I am glad today that hopefully that some kid walks into a hobby shop and doesn't have to play 40K. He can play Blood and Plunder. He can play 100 other games that are great. To be honest, like, I don't think the rules for 40K are that good. They haven't changed. I mean, they have advanced the game. Thank Christ. 8th edition actually took, stuff from Bolt Action, a few other games that they took a look at, and they have changed the game. I will say that. But the rules are fine.
Yeah.
I mean, Blood and Plunder is a much better rule set. Blood and Plunder is one of the best one of the best war games I've ever played in my fucking life. It's super intuitive. It's extremely strategic. It's fucking great. Beautiful rule book, everything. The models are great. It's cheap. There are other games to play. It's just they are the Titan. And, how do you compete with a Titan? Well, I mean, eventually a Titan will fall, maybe. I don't know. They do seem to be putting themselves all over the place with the shows and the games and this and that.
Yeah, that's the risk right there. I feel we were hinting at it earlier, where it's the shareholders is the
Yep.
risk. So they do the show. The show does really well. The show blows up. Suddenly, their books are not what they were. Right? You've got this tremendously successful. Imagine even like 1/100th of the social clearance of a Harry Potter or something. Suddenly everybody's dressing up like Eisenhorn for Halloween and shit. And that's it. Your company has changed forever. Suddenly you're in the business of TV. You're in the business of business. And that's potentially the killer.
A great example is WotC. It's Wizards of the Coast. A
Yeah.
lot of people. I work for Wizards of the Coast. I owe them a lot. I owe them. They've paid me buku dollars over the years with the projects that they've hired me to work on. And Faerun is not my favorite setting. I love Birthright. I'm an AD&D guy. That's my favorite setting because it's political and it's very different. They'll never do a setting like that. But WotC has changed. A lot of people crap on them because their source books haven't been as good, they haven't been as detailed, and got a lot of grognards. Half the community turned against WotC with good, in my opinion, sometimes with good reason for WotC practices that we're not going to get into. But like, it's an example of TSR ran itself into the ground. TSR had, I mean, you look at the old source books for AD&D and you're like, this is fucking insane. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing. I mean, it's a wackadoo. The people that they got to work on this shit, it's super complex, just tons and tons of information and hundreds of books. And you're like, oh yeah, I know. Yeah, they killed themselves, basically. They ran themselves in the ground. And then you got Wizards of the Coast buys them. And 3rd edition was a big success. Huge amount of proliferation for D&D, and that was a big thing. And then 4th edition dropped and everybody hated it. And now 5th edition came back and people loved it, but it's been out for a while and they're getting into the same shit. They're getting into movies. They're getting into this. They've gotten into video games, successful video games. They've, and it's like, it's changed the company and their products, like the Ravenloft book they came out with. It's like, yeah, it's not going to be suitable for grognards, for old guys, and it's not going to be suitable for new people.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't do enough with these IPs, these settings that they have. And then the settings that they release, you're just like, it's not the same, and they're trying desperately to make Dungeons and Dragons profitable like Magic the Gathering. Okay, Magic the Gathering is their golden goose. It's been their golden goose forever. And D&D is a pittance in comparison. And the CEO that took over a few years ago was like, well, we want to make this as profitable as Magic the Gathering.
Yeah.
And people see it, and again, just like we're in a gaming golden age, we are in an RPG golden age. The amount of games, you don't have to play D&D.
Yeah.
There's an insane amount of Cubicle 7 does amazing work.
God, yeah.
Lots of companies do amazing work. And it's just one of those things that's like, if there's a lot of variety, doesn't mean 40K or Games Workshop or WotC has to be on top. They're on top now. You can lose that goodwill quick as pan, so I'm wondering if there's going to be a turning point. I think GW's done a better job at dealing with and administering to its community. They've actually listened to the community, unlike ignoring them for 10 or 12 years. They have done steps and they are more receptive, and they make amazing models. They make them beautiful models.
Yeah.
And Age of Sigmar kicks ass. Warcry is amazing. I don't know if that's going to be the same with somebody like WotC. I'm just using them as an example of a company that I don't know if they're taking the hint. So I don't know. It'd be nice to have more variety at a game shop, and I think there is. BattleTech might be one of those. We got a lot of people from 40K coming into BattleTech, I'll tell you. And they're like, wait, I can use whatever model I want for whatever variant? And we're like, yeah, it's fine. Nobody cares. And they're like,
boom. I'm a big I'm a cyberpunk guy. When I was a kid, that was my tabletop RPG. So to see that arc has been incredibly interesting because it was one of the most interesting, inherently political, social games that you could play when you were 16 years old, and it was 1997 or some shit. It was like, wow, like I'm talking about big things during this RPG session. Holy shit. And then it kind of peaks around, I want to say 3rd 2020, and just goes away for all intents and purposes. It's done. It's over. It's had its time, and it's never going to be back. And you've got like World of Darkness shit because everybody's like edgy, and you've got D&D being D&D and just hoovering up so many people. And now, like, Cyberpunk Red is a big deal now. It's back in a major way because of a really good license to CD Projekt Red, and they made a great game that people really loved. And you can never write anything off for how it can resurge and where it could suddenly be. And like Monster Fight Club are doing like tremendously good cyberpunk games, like war games, skirmish level war games. So I'm kind of, long story short, I guess where I'm getting to is I'm a Mork Borg guy. I really like Mork Borg as a system and what it does and how open they are, and their art is just like aggressively fucking punk, and they're kind of, everything about them appeals to me. So I look at a Mork Borg and I go, those guys could crack it. Like, they could really, if they get in front of enough people will jive with it and love it. So as much as I think gateway companies are important, I do see ways around them for the right companies who are willing to take those risks and potentially completely crash and burn by playing an unsafe game that could potentially pay off.
Yeah. I mean, I think the PC culture, that has changed. It's silenced or put a chill on people, and to some extent it's great, to other extent it's ridiculous. Like, I'm pretty PC or whatever, but at the same time it's like when you're so big that you're afraid, or so small that you're afraid to take any risk, you wind up not having a voice. And sometimes games and things in games can be offensive.
Yeah.
And they're not written with the people that are writing them as agreement. It is just, okay, these people in this game, they're racist. They're just straight up racist. And they're not, but they also have this. Like, if they're racist and not completely evil, you're going to get shit on by basically everybody, right?
Yeah.
But the thing is, like, that's not really how life works, unfortunately.
Bingo.
Like, it's kind of like, I agree with you, like, you need these companies, and it's tough because we're not those companies. You're trying to, like, in the late 90s I was playing Werewolf, World of Darkness Werewolf, which had this big, strong environmental idea, spiritual idea, and it was great. It was interesting. It was very like, fuck those guys, fuck the big companies, screw them. But it's like, you don't see a lot of that stuff anymore. Like, you don't, I think people, maybe it's part of escapism, or they're just too afraid, or we've now been conditioned to not rebel in the same way. Like, I'm not a big punk guy, but I totally respect the punk mentality of like, fuck that shit. I'm gonna do what I want. You can't tell me what to do. And maybe there's gonna be a resurgence of that, considering what the fuck's going on, which is a good thing. And you will have companies doing that kind of stuff, but they do need to take risks. Sometimes, unfortunately, you offend people. I mean, people get offended by fucking everything. And I mean, I could be a pretty defensive person, but sometimes I'm like, God damn, dude, like, chill out. Like, you are way getting over your head for no fucking reason. These are games, man. Like, don't play it. Don't buy it, okay? But to shout to the hills that it's this and this and this, and you're just like, you're just playing into the hands of these big ass companies that tend to, they already have an established IP. They already have an established product base and customer base, so it's easier that for them to navigate these things, you know. And I don't know, like, it's tough. It is tough. It's weird coming out of the 90s when like everything was okay. It was like peak liberalism. It was just like, no, it's cool to be like counterculture, man.
Yeah.
And now it's like, well, I don't know.
It kind of
It's
went
different.
through a weird cycle where I guess it's like that 30-year thing. You had the 60s pushing back on the 50s, into the 70s, into the 80s, the 90s pushing back on the 80s. You know, the 80s was all about like how much money can you make. That was your value. Like cocaine powered, how much money can you make? And then the 90s, you had so many different splinterings of countercultures that were legitimately kind of countercultures, but ultimately, like all countercultures, didn't achieve their results, their intended results, because their intended results are always strangely like utopic, and that's just inherently impossible to pull off. So you end up into the depression cycle of, oh fuck it, you know, going to parties all weekend and dancing around in a field, didn't do shit, man. I'm gonna go become an accountant. It's like, you know, not everything needs to be such a hard swing reaction to the stimulus. It's, you can just let it simmer on your brain and then walk through it. And that's something that's being lost a little bit in, I really feel like I'm old when I'm saying this, but it's being lost a little bit in the age of social media, because the demand for response is instant. It's like, don't take time to think, don't take time to feel or decide what's important to you. Commit now and get fucked for it one way or the other. It's like, Jesus, come on. I'm trying to roll dice and not die in a trench here. Give me a break.
Well, I think we're so, I don't social media that much. I post up some of my BattleTech stuff, some of my pieces here and there. I just use it to advertise. I look at cat videos like everybody else. And I guess, I think I just firmly believe in something called like human fatigue, which is, to be honest, in the grand scheme of things, like social media is very new. And we are struggling as a society and culturally to deal with it, to understand having immediate gratification at your fingertips, and immediate news and immediate this and immediate that at your fingertips at all fucking times. I think there is going to be a counterculture. I think that it will erupt. I think people will stop using social media as much. I think it's already happening, because there's so much fucking stupid shit going on now. You know, you turn over and you're like, okay, time to doom scroll again.
Yeah.
You know, and people just get tired. You know, they get tired, and I think we'll evolve in a way that a lot of people don't predict. You know, because that's pretty much always what happens. Like, who the hell knew that the grunge and shit was going to come out of the 90s, from the 80s, the pop, super pop, this and that, whatever. And then all of a sudden you go into the 90s and you're like, whoa, this is completely the opposite of, and it's not screaming punk. It's not this, it's not that. It's basically like grunge is a very like thoughtful human expression of music. It really is. And I love grunge music because that's what I grew up with. But it's also, I'm smart enough. You can go back to, like you said, the 80s and the 70s and the 60s and the 50s, and you can chart almost like how people, or at least, I guess from my perspective, Americans are dealing with what's going on. And music is a fantastic representation of that. And it's funny because you don't really know about the counterculture usually until after it's already been established.
Yeah.
So, like, you know what I mean? Like, grunge in the early 90s is a little bit different than grunge in the late 90s, where it was just like we needed time to express ourselves and to change. And I think that's what's happening now with social media. And I think it's going to continue to happen. companies and stuff, they're taking advantage of it, making money while they can, and people are taking advantage of other people while they can. But I think we always tend to evolve and get wise, and humans usually have a good idea of like when they're being taken advantage of. That's not always the case, but I think we're gonna slowly start to go, maybe they don't have my best interests at heart. Maybe they don't, I always use the example of the X-Files. When you watch the X-Files, you're like, man, being against, not believing, not thinking that the government is bad and that they don't have your interests, that was cool in the fucking 90s. You were the counterculture. You were the extreme left. The what do they call them? The Four Horsemen or whatever. Those guys. They were like, or the Lone Gunman. That was
the Lone Gunman. There we go.
The Lone Gunman. And you're like, you watch the show and you're like, oh my god, this show is like raising all these questions. I'm like, should I be questioning the government? Remember, this is the 90s, coming out of the 80s, which is Reaganism, and they were fighting the Cold War at any cost, at this and that. And it's so weird when you go back and you watch that show, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. Being like anti-government and like anti-this was like super cool in the 90s. It was, no, you should question authority. Now it's like you got the other extreme people took that to the extreme. And now, so it's like, I don't know, it's just a weird time capsule is basically what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
And it's just really interesting to me. So I don't know. Hopefully we come out of it, and hopefully gaming comes out of it. I think it'll just keep continue to evolve. Like just like anything else. Like I'm sure 40K will be around. I'm sure WotC will be around, or D&D will be around in some fashion. But in the meantime, I think we're fortunate in the fact that like people bitch and complain, but I'm like, we have so much shit at our fingertips now, and you're still bitching.
Yeah.
You're still bitching, and it's affordable. It's just crazy to me. Like, again, the BattleTech Gothic crap. I'm like, don't play it. It's going to cost you $60, to buy the box set. There's some cool models, some rules. It takes so much energy to just complain about shit that, by the way, there's no release date yet. Well, where are the monsters? There's not going to be, this is like, nobody knows. I don't even know, and I'm semi-connected with the company. You know what I mean? Like, you can't please everybody. Basically these companies try to please everyone, and you can't. You can't do it. Everybody has a voice on the internet. One fucking guy says something, and all of a sudden there's 100 positive comments. Everybody listens to that one negative guy.
Yeah,
it's like never fails.
I'm aware there's an irony to this on account of like being a fucking YouTuber and whatever, but my YouTuber, like any success I've had on YouTube has been basically accidental, and almost the opposite of what I've wanted. I would like do something and it would start to pick up and take off, and I'd start to get lots of views, so I'd change what I was doing. I was like, oh fuck, people are watching these things. Okay, time to change. But Trench Crusade just fit like nicely, I think, into my brain. I don't know what that says about me. And I've kept it going, but I've really been trying to tell people and practicing myself to get my ass out of the algorithm. Stop feeding this goddamn thing with every choice I make. So I'm back to listening to far more like physical formats of music. Like I'm back on my mini disc shit, because mini discs are just like the best like music format ever. Back on vinyls, back on listening to cassettes, like anything I can get. Just trying to remove myself a little bit from algorithms, trying to just not have my phone in my pocket all day. Why do I need it in my pocket all day? What am I going to do? I think as more people do that, as people make it harder for companies to get to them and connect with them, ironically, I think that will be actually better for things overall, because those companies will need to try harder and be more honest and be more risky in how they get your engagement. And I don't want to say all good art is risky or all bad art is sans any type of risk, but there's a reasonable correlation
Yeah.
You know, to like cultural movements where people were fucking risking it with art. They were like, you know, it's even like you hinted at, like, to go back to the very first thing that we opened up this conversation with. If your patron decided the picture he'd paid for wasn't it, never mind not eating, try not breathing. You, you know, that kind of element to it. So hopefully we'll never return to those days, but I do long for people making it a little more difficult for these companies to get into their heads and concordantly into their pockets in that same way. Make them work for it a little more.
Yeah. I think it's for every action there's a reaction, right? And the bigger the action, the bigger the reaction, usually, right? That's physics. And it works very well with our society. That idea that it's like, yeah, I think things are happening now that you will see people taking risks. That it's passion. Art is passion. You know, there's also professionalism mixed in, right? I always say, like, a professional artist is somebody who could do the same job and not give a shit, or at least not care, but you're still human. So you still have to put yourself into that situation. Like, and I think we're going to see that. I firmly believe in, you know, I don't know. It is a gaming renaissance. And I think it's funny, like, with your stuff, you're saying, like, you find yourself drifting away from, you know, the mainstream or what's going mainstream, or, you know, and I think it's because when you and me were growing up and we went into that hobby shop and you were looking around, you know, and you see a Lehman Russ, or you see, like, and you pick up this magazine, you're like, this is like my secret. This is like this is my happy place. Like, I never knew, but man, this is like the coolest shit. And it's like, there's not that many people here, you know? And you're almost like creating your own version of that, you know, where it's like people have to find you. And when they find you, they're like, this is like a treasure. I want the same thing. And that's the magic, you know, that I'm very similar. It's like, I advertise to advertise because I sell prints and stuff. But, like, I don't do a lot of social media shit, really. I don't give a shit about, you know, announcing every fucking piece and this and that and going to all these. I don't give a fuck about any of that shit. I live my life. You know, I play my games. I have my friends and my family. And to me, like, I like even my books. I got 2 books out, but, like, I don't talk about all. The people are like, oh, I had no idea you have 2 books. I'm like, I don't talk about it. I want some kid to go into Barnes and Noble or Borders or his local bookshop, which is even better, and pick up my book and go, I don't know what this is, but this is fucking cool.
Yeah.
That's what I want. And you can't do that on a commercial scale. You can't do it. That's the problem with GW. That's the problem with WotC. It's all these guys are like, it doesn't feel the same. It's not the same. It's not the same. Okay, when you were a kid and you played your first D&D game and you're like, wait, I can do what? I can make my own character and I can do this and he's going to do this. And, you know, it's you and your group of friends sitting in like a little den, you know, at a table, and you're rolling dice and eating chips and having fun. And your parents come in and go, I don't know what the fuck is going on, but I guess they're laughing. It's fine. You know, like, and that's the secret. It's forming those little bonds and friendships, and, like, it's having something that everybody else doesn't have, you know, and it's your own little universe. Like, that's so great, especially today, because everything is so wide open. Everything is immediate. Everything is everything. And you just don't want it. It's overwhelming.
Yeah.
And it means it becomes like a blur. It's like getting blasted with light. You're just like, like, you know, like, no. So I totally get it, man. I love the fact that you're I guess it might be our generation just gonna lead the fucking charge and be like, yeah, put the fucking phone down. You know, like, just, I'm gonna leave it. Oh, you didn't text me back immediately. That's because it was another fucking room and I was working. You know, like, I don't need to have my fucking phone on me at all times. People wonder why they're so angry and, you know, scared and this, and I'm like, because you literally, as soon as you texted, everybody's on their phone constantly getting affected, you know.
You've built anxiety reaction into your life because something in your house bings or boops or whistles and you gotta deal with it instantly. Like, fuck that noise. I'm over it. Like, and I'm a I'm not a naturally anxious person. I guess for the last 10 years, I've been an unnaturally anxious person. I suddenly found myself dealing with anxiety. And before that, I had been a very chill, laid back human being to the extent that you could be. And I've been really like thinking about it a lot lately and processing that, like, fuck, I did that shit to myself. Like, I gotta undo all this focus on stimulus and catalysts and all that nonsense. I'm on a one-man mission to become a fucking inert object, basically. It feels like. So that's the way I'm going with it. And yeah, we'll see how it plays out. I feel like we should wrap, partially because I've kept you here for much longer than I thought. Partially because the conversation went in dramatically different directions than I could have imagined, but good ones always do. And then mostly because I'm afraid if we keep pushing our luck, the file will corrupt if I don't stop it recording soon.
Agreed.
So yeah, no, if you have anything, I never really know how to close these up. If there's anything you want to say to people or whatever who might be watching, then take the opportunity. I don't know if there's you've mentioned books and prints. People should check the site. Is there any parting messages for the audience at all?
Play the game. It's got a lot of passion and effort has gone into it. I think it's got a lot of merit, and I think there's a lot more to come out of it. So give it a chance, grow, help it grow. If you got ideas, throw the ideas out. Like throw them at them. They're open. Mike's a great guy, and I think the game is gonna go places. I mean, people seem to love the game. They love the idea, the IP. It's in good hands, and I'm just happy to have contributed something to it. At first, I didn't know much about it, and then then I talked to Mike and threw my ideas into it, and I became attached to it. Much more attached than I thought I would be. Much more than the typical project I handle. So, play the game. That's all I can say.
Nice.
Support them. That we need more companies like that, more games like that.
Yeah, we really do. Definitely find your thing and support. I've had this conversation a couple of times this week with different people, but like find the thing you like and then bravely like it. Don't like this shit quietly. It really means and matters a lot to the folks who are trying to create these things when they hear those voices from outside their life go, by the way, that shit's fucking dope. It really matters and it has a lot of impact. So I'm going to wrap this. I will thank the audience, all the subs who are watching, anybody who happened across it, anybody who is going to get angry at me in the comment section for something that I've said. It doesn't work on me. I'm very sorry. So yeah, thanks for watching, guys, and all the best.